crops are rotting in the field, livestock is dying, immigration raids are collapsing American agriculture.
All these farmers are crying about not getting no help right now. You know what?
I never thought I was going to lose this much money, this fast.
For decades, the United States treated its wheat exports as a certainty, a quiet assumption baked into the rhythm of global trade. From the sunlit plains of Kansas to the endless fields of North Dakota, American wheat wasn't just abundant, it was foundational. The world didn't just buy it, the world depended on it. Whether it was sandwich bread in London, soba noodles in Tokyo, or croissants in Paris, American wheat had long been the invisible ingredient behind the world's daily meals. And for the farmers who harvested it, there was a deep, almost unspoken confidence that these shipments would continue season after season, year after year. But in 2025, something changed. There was no dramatic announcement, no sanctions, no viral headlines. Instead, it began with silence. Emails that once confirmed regular shipments suddenly stopped arriving. Standing contracts weren't renewed. Containers that should have been bound for Houston ports quietly redirected toward Vancouver. And in farms across the Midwest, surrounded by silos full of unsold grain, a chilling realization began to take shape. The buyers had left and no one told them why. It wasn't just one country, it was 5. The United Kingdom, Spain, Japan, Germany, and Indonesia, once considered among America's most reliable agricultural partners, had simultaneously scaled back or outright abandoned their U.S. wheat orders. There were no diplomatic statements, no accusations, no televised fallout. Just a quiet disappearance. A set of choices made behind closed doors in boardrooms, warehouses, and shipping offices. But the impact was unmistakable. They didn't leave because the wheat was bad. They left because something deeper had shifted, something America didn't see coming. And that raises the real question. What drove these nations away from a commodity as stable, as non-political as wheat? Why Canada? Why now? And what does this silent exodus mean for the future of American farming and your next meal? While policymakers in Washington sparred over tariffs and foreign policy and news outlets obsessed over diplomatic maneuverings, a quieter and far more urgent crisis was unfolding in the American heartland. It didn't begin with a protest or a headline. It began with a subtle, almost invisible shift in the rhythm of rural life. And for once, the fallout was immediate. In states like Kansas, Nebraska, and the Dakotas, the backbone of America's wheat belt grain elevators began to overflow. By mid-2025, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reported that wheat stockpiles had surged to 850 million bushels, marking a 22% jump from the year before. What was once a symbol of abundance became a glaring sign of rejection. Buyers from abroad had vanished, and containers sat idle. Contracts weren't being renewed, phones weren't ringing. And in many communities, no one needed to ask why. The market reacted with brutal indifference. Wheat prices collapsed to $5 per bushel levels, unseen in years, slashing profit margins to the bone. Faced with unsellable harvests and no way to recoup their investments, farmers were left with agonizing decisions: sell at a loss, divert crops to livestock feed, or in a movie that felt almost sacrilegious, plow their wheat back into the ground. For families who had cultivated the same soil for generations, this wasn't just an economic loss, it was a psychological one. And that heartbreak wasn't limited to the fields. Fertilizer prices remained volatile, diesel costs continued their wild swings, and a growing labor shortage forced farms to pay more for fewer hands. The result, even high-yield operations, the ones that did everything right, were losing $50 to $60 per acre, according to regional farm reports. The very productivity they once celebrated had become a burden, exposing them to even greater losses as the market punished scale rather than rewarded it. Then came the human cost. More than 200 workers tied to wheat processing, logistics, and field labor were either laid off, furloughed, or forced to migrate into other sectors, like soybean farming, corn, or animal husbandry. Some rural towns saw a domino effect. One family losing their farm, another their job, a third their local diner closing as foot traffic dried up. These weren't just numbers, they were funerals for entire ways of life. If you looked at the macroeconomic data, the situation seemed oddly optimistic. The USDA projected net farm income for 2025 to reach $180.1 billion, a whopping 29.5% increase over 2024. But buried inside that figure was a hard truth. More than $33 billion of that income came not from the land, but from Washington through emergency subsidies, disaster aid, and compensation programs designed to keep farms afloat, not help them thrive. Take those emergency lifelines away, and what remains is a sobering picture. Real unsubsidized farm income is still well below the 20-year average. Crop prices are falling, input costs are rising, and morale across the wheat belt has rarely been lower. In many regions, farming has stopped being a business. It has become a form of managed decline, a desperate attempt to hold on to identity while hemorrhaging value. And perhaps the most haunting part of this story, it's happening without a sound. No boycotts, no protests, just a quiet severing of ties from countries that used to depend on American wheat and now don't. So, as the silos continue to swell and the phones stay silent, the question echoing across the plains isn't just whether American agriculture is in trouble. It's whether anyone still believes that this system can be saved or if we're just watching it unravel in slow motion. While American farmers waited for purchase orders that never arrived, the truth was quietly being written elsewhere in spreadsheets, shipping manifests, and rewritten contracts. One by one, 6 of the U.S.'s most loyal wheat importers slipped away, not in protest, not in anger, but in calculated, quiet retreat. For decades, U.S. wheat dominated the UK market built on handshake deals and a long-standing belief in American reliability. But in 2025, Canada surged ahead, capturing 32% of Britain's wheat imports, overtaking the U.S. for the first time. The reason? Timing and transparency. While U.S. ports were jammed and labor shortfalls delayed shipments, Canadian wheat arrived on time and fully traceable, complete with digital supply records. The loss wasn't just financial. Over $500 million in annual trade vanished. It was symbolic. A trust that once needed no signatures had quietly expired. Spain had long been one of the U.S.'s easiest partners, consistent orders, low disputes. But NATO tensions and uncertainty over U.S. policy rippled into agriculture. Spanish buyers didn't wait for sanctions or trade breakdowns. They preemptively moved to a politically neutral supplier, Canada. Within months, the U.S. lost nearly 60% of its market share, while Canada tripled its wheat exports to Spain, thanks in part to its robust ESG-certified supply chain. It wasn't about price, it was about avoiding risk. In Japan, quality is not negotiable. Every shipment is lab-tested, every deviation noted. In 2025, Japan made a decisive move. Canadian wheat replaced American wheat as the top import for the first time in decades. Why? Consistency, documentation, and gluten stability. Canada offered fully certified reports on protein content, moisture levels, and processing condition standards the U.S. struggled to meet regularly. The result? A loss of nearly $240 million in trade and the lowest U.S. wheat share in Japan since 2011. German importers didn't just want clean wheat, they legally required proof of it. Under new supply chain laws, flour and grains must include verifiable data on CO2 emissions, pesticide usage, and soil practices. Canada, having invested early in smart farming systems, was ready. Every Canadian shipment came with a QR code linking to real-time environmental data. The U.S., still catching up, failed to comply in time, and in doing so surrendered over 1.2 million tons of EU market share, most of it to Canada. For Indonesia, one of the world's largest wheat importers, the priority wasn't purity, it was predictability. In an inflation-sensitive economy, even small fluctuations in wheat prices can destabilize entire food systems. Canada delivered a solution: fixed-price contracts lasting 6 to 12 months matched with timely delivery. The U.S., hampered by political shifts and price volatility, couldn't compete. By mid-2025, Canada's wheat exports to Indonesia had surged 190%, while American orders evaporated. In Italy, wheat isn't just food, it's heritage. Every strand of pasta, every crust of bread must comply with PDO-protected designation of origin standards, demanding transparency from farm to oven. Canada delivered. U.S. suppliers lacking unified traceability systems didn't. Quietly but decisively, Italian mills and gourmet producers turned northward. The U.S. lost over $230 million CAD in wheat trade within a year, not because of poor quality, but because they couldn't prove it met the new standards. What united these 6 markets wasn't just their exit, it was the reason behind it. They weren't chasing lower prices, they were chasing confidence. And in 2025, that confidence didn't come from the United States. And if America can lose the global wheat market this quietly, what's the next industry to fall without a sound? It wasn't about price. It was about something deeper: transparency, dependability, and consistency. Canada didn't just compete with grain, it competed with systems. With seamless investments in logistics, traceability, and policy enforcement, it earned what every exporter dreams of, but few truly possess: global trust. Meanwhile, the United States, despite its vast production power, lacked the tools to meet the world's evolving demands. It had the supply but not the credibility to back it. And that's what makes this shift so alarming. Because if trust can be lost, even in wheat, one of the world's most stable apolitical commodities, what happens when the stakes are higher? Will American agriculture reclaim its place at the table? Or is this just the first quiet crack in a much larger global realignment? What do you think? Is this shift temporary or the start of something irreversible? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're listening.